And it was actually really freeing for me to know that some of like my mentors didn't have all the answers.
Mhm.
And that kind of has led me to a path of kind of feeling more confident in my own talks and walk with the Lord.
Rewrite.
New life,
New beginning.
Hi, this is Jonathan Unthank. Welcome to Rewrite, transformative stories of new life in Jesus. Today I'm talking with Christian recording artist Jordan Feliz. What is going on, my friend? Wanted to give you the opportunity just to share your story, how you came to know Jesus, and what Jesus is doing in your life right now. It's been neat being able to talk to several other folks about just their experience of that, where the light came on, in their heart and
Yeah,
their soul, and it was like, wow, this is life changing, literally.
yeah,
And just wanted to let you share your story about what God's done in your life.
of course, man. I'd be honored. Yeah, so I've been raised in the church my whole life. And really started diving into um, you know, wanting to be a Christian. Like I remember asking my parents when I was 7. And then when I turned 8 is the when I gave my life to the Lord.
Mhm.
And was raised up in the church during that whole season. Um, and then, I like to tell this part of my story because around my sophomore year in high school, um, I realized that I was excelling pretty highly in science. And so my chemistry teacher had told me, "Hey, you should really take my advanced biology class next year, and maybe you can get into like physics the next year, or whatever, if you pass with the right grades, and all this other stuff." And so I did. I hopped in, and the next year, my junior year, I took a advanced biology class, and I also took a physics class, um, and man, like I kind of came home one day, and you get piled up with homework during in those phases because you're taking college courses,
Yeah.
during high school, um, and I came home, and I just told my mom, like, I don't want this to freak you out, but like I'm being taught all these things in advanced biology about evolution and all these other theories about how life, you know, potentially came to be, all these things. And I was like, and I'm just trying to figure out like where like the Bible kind of fits into modern day science and where does that, exist and blah, blah, blah. My mom, I remember, dude, like she literally looked at me and she goes, "Well, you know what?" She's like, "I'm so proud of you for being so like academically, strong and pursuing, something that you're good at." She's like, "But," she's like, "if you put like literally 20% of the effort that you're putting into that into reading your Bible every day, you could figure out those answers on your
Oh, that's cool, man.
own."
Wow.
And I was like, "Huh, all right, challenge accepted." So that year, just really read through the Bible. I asked all the questions that I could ever have. It was like I think my mom kind of told our pastor and my youth pastor and some of our like leaders, um and they literally weren't scared at all. It's just like, "Okay, ask me the questions. What do you want to ask? Like what do you need answered to feel more confident?" And so, it's like I'd kind of start to ask questions. I'm like, "Well, what about this? Or what about that? Or what about this?" And it was really cool to watch like some of my like spiritual mentors be able to say certain things like that. I think c- certain people, man, I think we get so caught up in feeling like we have to have the answer to everything. Like they're like, "Honestly, dude, that's a really good question. I don't know." And it was like, cool. Well, that's actually good for me to know because if you would have faked an answer, it probably would have made me feel really less confident.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so, man, we just ran through this season where I just really got into the Bible even heavier than I was, got really like deep into the theology of everything. Um and that year, the next year, I when I turned 17, went up to our this big youth camp that we have up in my hometown, and I rededicated my life to Christ, and I knew that that was something that I just needed to dive in on my own accord. Like I didn't just want my parents to like, and how special was that my parents and I, my parents led me to the Lord when I was 8, and that kind of has led me to a path of kind of feeling more confident in my own talks and walk with the Lord. And so, a lot of people don't know this, but I was in a metal band when I turned 17, rededicated my life. And within like a week, I was leading worship for a youth event in my hometown. And I got approached by this band. They were a larger band in California. They were really heavy metal, and but they were all Christians. And so they're like, dude, we would love for you to come and sing like clean vocals for our band. And that was super not my vibe, but ended up going and meeting them and just fell in love with kind of their mission, like the mission of like, being able to go into these venues and bars and theaters and these crummy little places we'd go play shows and tell people about Jesus, and it kind of set me on fire for ministry, honestly. Just seeing people encounter the Lord that, or even just, I mean, dude, there were people that we would just tell them like, dude, somebody loves you though, like somebody loves you for who you are. Like they love you right now. Like he loves you today, just as much as when you feel like you weren't, you know, a bad person or whatever you feel like about yourself right now. He still loves you and he wants a relationship with you. And just being able to converse with people that think that they are way past the bounds of grace, or salvation, and be able to tell them that, it was really cool to watch how life altering that was for so many people. So I did that for 5 years, and then my band broke up, and I took a job at a church, and I was a worship leader for a year, and really kind of felt like that was kind of what I was supposed to do. I was like, man, maybe, because I felt like around when I turned 15, I felt like the Lord rushed over me one day after a worship conference thing that I was leading again. And I just felt like the Lord told me, like, this is what I have for you. You're going to lead people in worship. And so I've just been pursuing that, and so then, when my band broke up and I went to the church, it was kind of like, yeah, I think this is kind of where I'm supposed to be. And about 3 months into me working, dude, I finally have like a stable paycheck. My wife is living her best life. She's working at her dream salon in my hometown, and we're feeling really good. I get a phone call from a buddy, and he goes, "Hey, if I fly you to Nashville, will you come out here and write some songs with some friends of mine?" And I was like, "Sure, that sounds like fun." So I fly out to Nashville and I write for like 2 weeks with a bunch of people out here, and just fell in love with Nashville, and immediately felt like the Lord was like, "You should pray about being here." So I did. I went home. My wife and I had just gotten married, and I was like, "Hi, should we move to Nashville?" And she was like, "What?"
Did you
And
really
so
approach it like that? Like,
yeah,
hi.
yeah, probably, honestly. It's probably like, "Hi, so
So,
I got something we got to chat about."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, so dude, I just brought it to my wife and was like, "This is what I feel. Can we pray about this?" And we prayed for 6 months about it. And after 6 months, we felt like the Lord was like, "You should go." So, man, this is where I like to lead with like me rededicating my life to find my own faith because of this story. So, my wife and I essentially, we were praying about moving. We get this, yes, go ahead. Well, I was in a band for 5 years. I had contacts all over the country. So I'm like, hey, why don't I book us some shows? Because we can't afford to move. So it's like, what if I book us some shows and it'll pay for our move? And so I book us 2 weeks of shows across the country. And, you know, feeling really good. 2 weeks before we're supposed to leave, dude, every single one of my shows I booked got canceled.
Oh, wow.
And I remember feeling like, uh-oh, like, and so we immediately go into, have we been kind of like lying to ourselves? Like, is this really not what the Lord wants us to do? Whatever. And so, um, my wife went in and I went into like just prayer and fasting for a couple of days, and we're just praying. And I just kept feeling like the Lord was like, no, go, but you need to trust me. And I'm like, what? Like, dude, I can't go on a dream here.
Yeah.
Dude, like we don't have enough money to get there. So I'm just like, Lord, like, oh my gosh. So, but I just kept feeling like the Lord's like, just trust me, just trust me, just trust me. So it's the night before we're gonna leave, and I still have nothing booked. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And my mom and dad were like, listen, like, if you guys get across the country, we will help you get back home. If you really can't make it, whatever. So I'm like, okay. And we leave and we start driving, and I just start cold calling churches, dude. I'm cold calling churches in LA, San Bernardino Valley. I'm just calling churches on the route, that we're going to take. And I got I'm just calling and be like, hey, do you need a worship leader for anything tonight? Like just anything.
Yeah.
And I get a hold of a church, and they're like, yeah, dude, our worship pastor came down with strep throat and can't sing our worship. Do you want to come in? We'll pay you a couple $100. I'm like, dude, perfect. And I'm like, hey, can I sell some merch? Just like anything. So, dude, we show up, I sell a little bit of merch that gets us to Phoenix. We go Phoenix. I find a show in Phoenix that pays for us to get to Albuquerque. In Albuquerque, we find a place. Somebody blesses us with just like $500. So then that gets us to Amarillo. Amarillo, I play another concert and get another $500. Gets us to you know Oklahoma City, and we get to Oklahoma City, and I have nothing, and we're down to probably about $300. So we about $300 to our name, like all in. And I was like, man, this might be it. This might be the moment I got to call my parents and, be like, hey, can you just pay for the gas back home? And then, we'll figure it out. But I have a buddy text me, and he goes, hey, somebody told me that you're trying to book a show in Oklahoma City. I have a buddy who has a pastor or has a church there. He's a pastor. And I'm like, oh, give me his number, so call him. And he goes, oh, buddy, our church actually dispersed. We don't meet anymore. But he goes, I have a friend who started a church in the barn in his backyard. And I was like, perfect,
That's
perfect,
awesome.
right? I'm like looking up at the sky, just like, thank you. Yeah, this sounds about right. Um, and so I call this guy. His name's Tony Bailey, and I call Tony up, and he goes, you know what, dude? I would love for you to come and lead worship. I got $150, and you can sell merch. I'm like, sweet. So we go there, and it's the day of the Oklahoma City bombing marathon, and their whole church is participating in it. So like he said, they usually have, maybe about 100 to 200 people across the two services that they have, show up. And that I play for first service, and there was 5 people there. So
Wow.
I'm like, ugh, because I'm like really hoping I can sell at least a little bit of merch to get us, because we just trying to push. And then the next service, there's like 20 people there, but 20 additional to the 5. So I'm like, I wonder why those 5 people, the 5 people didn't leave. So I'm like, oh, maybe that's just something that they do at this church. Like they just stick around. So I wrap up, second service wraps up, and I go back to my table, and I'm just like, Lord, please, I just, man, just anything. Let us just try to get a $100 to $200 to get to the next place. And this lady walks up to me who has been there since first service. And she walks up to me and she hands me a check for $500. Wow. And she goes, hey, this sounds crazy. But while you were leading worship in first service, I felt like the Lord told me you needed this. So I just want to give this to you. And I was like, oh my gosh, dude, you have no idea. Like, that is, you have no idea what this means. Like, whatever. And I'm like, please pick anything on the table, just take it. Like, I love you. Thank you so much. And and she goes, oh no, I don't need anything. I felt like I just needed to give this to you. I'm like, oh my gosh, well, thank you so much. So then another dude walks up behind her and he goes, well, I guess you're not going to believe this either, but he hands me a check for $500. And he goes, same thing she got, I got. And so we talked about it at first service, and I felt like I needed to give the same thing. I was like, what?
What is
Like, just
happening here?
mind blowing. Yeah, what's happening? And and then we sell, sell a little bit from some people, and they're supporting me. And then at the very end, a dude walks up at the very end of we're tearing down merch, and I'm like, dude, we had made, probably just between the checks and merch, we'd probably made about $1,600, which was like life changing. It was like,
Yeah.
oh my, we're gonna make it. And this guy walks up and he hands me a check for $1,000, and he goes, dude, somebody, I'm telling you, like, somebody told me that there were other people that felt this, but I felt like the Lord gave me this exact number and I'm supposed to give it to you. So dude, like, I walked in and I had gained almost $3,000 just playing this barn.
Mhm.
And it was enough for us to get to Nashville. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm just like crying, dude. Like, my wife and I, we're like just crying. And we make our way to Little Rock, and we find a host home that I had stayed at in the past, and we stayed with them, and they blessed us with another $500. And so we get to Nashville, we roll up, and you know we start unpacking our stuff, and I'm tired. It's just been a long drive, and it's just been a kind of an emotional roller coaster. And dude, I kid you not, like, I start adding up all of the cash that we got, and I'm like, we we didn't just we didn't just get here. We actually made money. Like, we made enough money for our first couple months rent in our spot. And dude, I just like started breaking down. I'm like, God, thank you so much, because I just felt like he kind of downloaded to me that day that if you would have done it your way, you would have just got here.
Mhm.
But now that you've done it my way, it looked scary, but that you did it my way, I'm providing even exponentially more just because you
Mhm.
trusted me.
Yeah.
And man, it was just wild. So my wife and I were praying, and we're just like, thank you, God, for getting us here, safety, this and that. And dude, about an hour later, I'm like, hey, let's go get some coffee. And my buddy David, who moved to Nashville with us, he was like, yeah, I need coffee. Let's go. And so we go into downtown Franklin, which is where we live now. But we go in there because it's the only coffee shop that I knew that was there. And so we're at a Starbucks and walking across the street, and I hear a lady go, hey, you guys look like you're in a band. What kind of band are you in? And I'm pretty shy about certain things. So I was like, oh yeah, kind of do music. And my buddy David's like, no, this guy's awesome. You have to check him out. And and she goes, oh, well, what kind of music do you do? And I said, oh, well, we just moved here today, actually, but I felt like I'm supposed to be here. I felt like God called me to do Christian music. And she's like, no way, I was in a Christian band. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, just thinking, probably like, worship or whatever, and she's like, yeah, no, I was in a band called FFH. And I was like, what? Like, I just freaked out. I was like, dude, my parents, you're like one of my parents' favorite bands growing up. Like, I've listened to every record you have. And she's like, well, I'm Jennifer. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know who you are. I've seen you play, whatever. She goes, well, why don't you email me a demo? And I'm like, okay, cool. So that night I email her a demo. And 3 weeks later, dude, I had every record label in Nashville reach out to me.
That's amazing.
And so the reason why I love sharing like this full part of my testimony and how I've kind of gotten to be where I am today is because people often ask me, they're like, oh man, like, oh, sorry, I don't know if that just did. Can you still hear me?
Oh yeah, got you, man.
Okay, sorry, dude. Um, but you know, I like to share this because people always talk to me about, how I got to where I was. A lot of people ask me about the music industry, but then, I have a lot of entrepreneurs that'll reach out and be like, like, how did you kind of start? Or how did you, you know, I'm like, man, like, I tell people, I'm like, do you believe in Jesus? And if you do, the secret sauce is following him.
Hmm.
That's it. There is no like algorithm to this life that makes more sense than that. And in the initial start of it, it's terrifying
Hmm.
because you don't understand because you haven't built that trust, that faith, right? You haven't built that faith, that trustful faith, man, where you're like, please be there. You know
Oh
what I
yeah.
mean? Please be there. Um, but once you've done a couple things that you're like, wow, I can't believe I just did that. Like dude, it's the people that answer the call to pray for somebody random at the mall or pray for somebody in Walmart
Hmm.
or to, walk over and just be a light to somebody that they feel like God's calling. Those kinds of steps get you to where you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just obedience, man. It's submitting our lives, which is actually what worship actually is. Like the real word for worship is proskuneo, and that word means submission,
Yeah.
which means we're just submitting ourselves to God. But like that kind of posture is what has led me to where my faith is today.
I love that.
And there's no like crazy, I don't have like some crazy testimony where it's like, oh, I was a drug addict for 20 years or anything like that. But what I do know is we serve a God who wants relationship with you. In the moment that you bind a relationship with him and you actually start putting that relationship into practice of an actual relationship with, like, we're talking about the creator of all, right? He's created everything. He's not scared of what you're going through because he's already foreseen. He knows everything. He is our father. He knows all the things that we're up against. But the moment that you start exercising that properly, like, your whole life shifts. And I heard that my whole life growing up in church, but it took until that big leap of faith that I really understood what that meant. And I find that people that are struggling with their faith, they typically have not made that leap that looks kind of scary, but God is calling them into.
Yes. Yes.
And so when I talk about my testimony, I talk a lot about the fact that God kind of like told me to jump and I jumped,
Hmm.
you know? Like he was like, listen, I want you to jump, and it's not off a cliff. It's just I want you to jump as high as you can and check this out. And then all of a sudden you realize like, oh my gosh, I'm on a mountain. Like,
Yeah.
how did I
Yeah.
jump this high? And it's like, well, it wasn't you, but it was the faith that you stood on. And that's where I think that faith of a mustard seed,
Yeah.
it's so tiny. But the moment that you could have just a portion of that, God can do so much with who he's created you to be. And so for me, my testimony has led me to a place where, man, like now today, you know, um, I've dealt with a lot of things like being in Christian music, and all of a sudden, it's like about 4 years ago, I started not feeling like myself, actually 5 years ago now. And I'm like, man, I don't know what's going on with me, but I'm not sleeping. I'm not this, I'm not that. And then that led me down a whole different, place of learning about my faith because I started getting really depressed and I started getting severe anxiety for like, what's going on with me? Like, I'm not this guy. Like, I I'm like this chill kid from California that
Yeah.
grew up wanting to be a pro athlete or a singer. Like I'm not trying to like, run a Fortune 500 company. I'm just like, doing what I feel like God's calling me to do. But I started realizing that I was operating outside of the confines in which the assignment that God gave me,
Hmm.
which again it's learning about my faith again.
Yeah.
It's learning about my relationship with God and what he's put on me, you know? And so I think everybody has a very specific assignment on their life. We're all called to the same thing because we're all called to be Christ followers.
Mhm.
But our assignments look very different. God is going to utilize us very differently, whether it means somebody who's listening is feeling called to be a cashier at a grocery store, or whether you feel like you're called to be in Christian music or a worship leader, or whether you're called to be a doctor or a radio DJ,
Yeah.
or, whatever it is, God is going to use you in such a massive and mighty way in that space if you trust him with it. And if you operate in a place that is like exactly where he's actually assigned you to. And so, man, like over the last several years, I've been able to tackle anxiety and depression. And again, it's just, I call it like a chiropractor visit, but it's like the Lord kind of like realigning you and
Oh
saying,
yeah.
like, here are some things that are way out of whack, like you're posturing yourself in a place where you're trying to fulfill this and not fulfill what I'm assigning you to. Like, don't try to fulfill something that I'm not assigning you to, because then that's when you start down that slippery slope and you're wondering why things aren't going the way that you want them to. It's like, well, they're not going the way that you want them to because they were never intended to go that way. I think oftentimes we can get really caught up in that in our faith is like, I'm going to do what I feel like God has assigned me to, and I'm going to keep doing that. And it's like, but also you can't just do that and not listen anymore.
Yeah.
That's you still have to be in relationship. You still have to say, hey, God, like maybe I'm not supposed to do it. Am I supposed to be here? What am and so dude, like, we in our family, we kind of pray about everything now. It's like, God, should we be signing our kids up for this camp? You know, like, is this something we should really be doing? Like, or God, is it, good for us to be, you know, buying this new car right now? Should we be purchasing that, or we really need one? Like, we need a new car right now. Like, our car is breaking down all the time. Should we get one? Like, and you start to see God. And again, it's that practice and relationship. And that's where I find that the people that have some of the most incredible relationships and testimonies with relationship with Jesus, it's never been this one moment.
Mhm.
This one moment, that one moment might have pushed you into a place where now I have open hands,
Mhm.
but it's always an accumulation of a million little moments that
That's
have
good.
led you into a place where I have so much trust and I have so much faith that now it's me operating in a place that is open-handed constantly. And the moment that I feel my hands close or clench or whatever it is, it feels almost uncomfortable to do that now. So it's very anytime you're trying to get good at this, we started talking about golf earlier. This is a
Yeah.
really good analogy. The golf swing is so all over the place,
Yep.
and for a lot of people, it's like the hardest thing to do. But once you start getting good at the golf swing, it's really easy to know. You can start coaching yourself
Mhm.
because you know what you're doing wrong just by the way that you're hitting the ball. So you're like, oh man, I really came over the top, or man, I'm shifting my weight back, or I'm doing this. It's the same thing with your relationship with God. If you're like this, you know when things are good. When you're like this, you're like, my hands are clenched right now. I should probably open them back up. And
Mhm.
again, the faith to do this sometimes is way harder than to do that.
Exactly right.
But again, it's all repetition. It's practice. It's just like a marriage with your wife. It's just like a marriage with your husband. It's a marriage with, or a relationship, whatever it is. It's all relational. And that's why God has pushed us into that. And I think that's why he's written himself into every testimony. His, who he is in all of us. And I
Mhm.
think that's why he's placed that in all of us,
Mhm.
is because we're supposed to be exercising that all the time. And that awakening of your faith, some people have it later, some people have it earlier in life. But the moment that happens, that relationship, it's that accumulation of those million little moments of like beauty and like, whoa, I just trusted him with that one moment of like, you know, like I have one moment, dude. It is tormented me, dude. Tormented me. But have you ever felt like you're supposed to pray for somebody
Oh
and you
yeah.
don't know them?
Yeah.
Okay. I was sitting at a restaurant with my wife and my kids and my mother and my father-in-law, and we're in Phoenix, Arizona. And there was a husband and wife that were having what I felt was a very tense conversation behind us. And dude, we sat down and I felt like God literally, like I heard them, and it just sounded, they were going through something.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally very clearly felt like God said, go over there and pray for him.
Mm.
And dude, I was like, what? Like, you're almost trying to make excuses. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no way, that's not real. Like, I can't walk up. They're in this really tense I'm not gonna go walk over there and do that. And then again, I felt it. Like, it's like the lady brings out our waters and like, squeezing my lemon in my water. And again, go pray for them. Like, I'm just sweating, like just, oh, I'm so nervous. But what if they take it wrong? What if they're like, dude, get out of here, whatever. And then we eat our food. Dude, I feel like God was like on my neck, like just like, go, son, go pray for them. Like that stern but loving, like, do it. And like, dude, I didn't do it. I chickened out, man. And I remember leaving feeling like that could have been an opportunity for me to be Jesus for two people that are hurting. And I chose to not give them a gift, which God was trying to give them.
Mm-hmm.
And since that day, dude, I have never ignored that feeling ever again. I don't care how awkward it is. I don't care if they hate me after. I don't care what it is. I've prayed for people that have cussed at me after. I've
Mm-hmm.
prayed for people, but I know that if I don't do it, that I'm responsible now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm responsible. God is now going to hold me responsible when I get up there, and he's going to go, dude, do you see how this moment could have transitioned? It could have postured somebody completely different in their trajectory. It could have done this. It could have done that. That one moment of God's calling us into obedience could change somebody's life. It could change my life
Well, yeah, totally.
just by doing it. And so, man, like, again, my testimony has been a constant state of learning and a constant state of relationship building with the Lord. And I feel like if you're doing it any other way, you should start praying,
Yeah.
because I feel like God wants us to constantly be in communication with him because he loves us and he cares for us. And it's not because it's out of necessity, but he wants us to be in it with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I've started seeing that relationship with my son and my daughter too. It's like they want time with me. They want time. And I want time with them. So whenever they're like, oh, I would just want to go listen to music, it's like, well, I, I want to hang out with you. You know what I mean? And that's how God feels about us all the time. And so those moments where we can actually take the time to say, hey, I'm going to set aside 15 minutes to be quiet with you, like what a gift that is to him and to his heart, and how much clearer we can hear him, after those moments.
I love Well, I
Yeah,
think about, as you're talking about that, actually in a sermon I heard recently was faith is just long obedience over time.
exactly, dude. That is exactly what it is. That is all it is.
I love that. And you can almost visualize that
A
as,
hundred
and,
percent.
and looking at Abraham, in the Bible
Oh,
where God
dude,
just
come
says,
on.
hey, I'm going to give you this land. And he's like,
Yep.
here we go.
Well, not to mention he calls him to do all these things,
Yeah.
and it's like, are you sure?
Yeah,
Like, it's
exactly.
like when you're reading about like his just faith, you're
Mhm.
like, bro, I would have given up. You know, the moment that you were like, hey, why don't you go sacrifice your son? I'd be like, peace, bro, I'm out.
Yeah,
You know what I
no
mean?
kidding.
Like, I wouldn't have the faith. I'd be like, sorry, I
Hmm.
can't do that. But
Hmm.
again, watching him participate and then watching what God does in every moment in that
Yeah.
story is like, dude, like, talk about a guy who's like, I mean, at the peak level of obedience. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? And dude, I've thought about Abraham so much lately because I'm like, man, I'm going through a lot of, things just with, what we do
Hmm.
out here,
Hmm.
and really trying to, you know, do something that can get us back to the posture of actually building the kingdom of God.
Hmm.
Um, and it's taken a lot of work.
Hmm.
But I think I'm really close to cracking the code. But in that, every step feels like a step forward and two steps back.
Yeah.
But I keep feeling like God is like, keep going, keep going, keep going. But that obedience is hard to have when you start getting discouraged, or
Hmm.
when you start feeling like, oh, I feel really weird about this phone call because I've only talked to this person one time, and I don't know how they're going to receive what I'm either asking, or if they're gonna hear my message, or if they're gonna hear what I'm asking for, or what I'm trying to get them to kind of dream with me or whatever. It's like, but again, that obedience, man, it's crucial. It's just like being obedient with your wife. It's like, do you want to have a successful marriage? Then you need to be in communication, and you need to be in a posture where I'm gonna put you at the forefront of of my life. You know what I mean? With me, it's like God is at the helm, but you're on the ship with me. And I think, like, that's the thing is, that's a huge part of what I feel like God has really put on my testimony, and what He's called me to be, and also what He's assigned me to be. So.